with a focus on freshwater ecology and conservation. Before starting at the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation, Darla worked for Parks Canada and the Nature Conservancy of Canada on projects throughout Eastern Canada. Terry Melanson, who will be going second, is the coordinator of client liaison partnerships with DFO. He is a University of Moncton graduate with a master's degree in biology, specialized in fish habitat. Before joining DFO, Terry worked for environmental groups as a fish habitat biologist, as a water quality expert with the New Brunswick Department of Environment, and as a private environmental consultant. A large part of his experience is related to fish habitat protection and restoration, fish population studies, and water quality. After the presentation, we will hold an open question and answer session. You'll have the option of asking questions directly using your microphone on your computer if you raise your little virtual hand in your control panel, or you can type them and we'll read them aloud. So without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Darla.
Thanks, Michelle. So hello, everyone. As Michelle said, my name is Darla Saunders, and I'm the Conservation Program Coordinator at the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation. So in my presentation this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, I'm going to review how the grant application process works, new developments in our process. I'm going to give you some tips for preparing a great application to the Foundation, and also talk about some common mistakes that you can avoid. So a bit of background first on the Foundation. Our mission is to promote enhanced community partnerships in the conservation of wild Atlantic salmon and its habitat in Atlantic Canada and Quebec. We're an independent, nonprofit organization that was established through a one-time grant of $30 million from the Government of Canada. That grant was invested, and we use the interest that's generated as the source of funds for the grants that we give out each year. We're also very fortunate to have developed partnerships with provincial liquor agencies in New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, and the funds that are generated through those partnership programs are also distributed as grants in those provinces for the conservation of wild Atlantic salmon and its habitat. So we have a dual mandate as per our funding agreement with DFO. First, to ensure a well-managed organization and to provide funding to salmon and its habitat conservation in perpetuity, and secondly, to prudently invest the fund that we've received to protect its capital and ensure that remains a permanent source of funding. So we're extremely fortunate this year. We've got $1 million available in grant funding for 2015 thanks to prudent investment on the part of our board. And the funds that are displayed there is what's available for each province as well as for our interprovincial pool. So in addition to a fund for each province, we also have a fund that's available for projects that take place across provincial boundaries or that are broadly applicable to the whole region. So the amounts that are available for each province, they're based on a funding formula that's developed by our Central Advisory Committee, and it takes into account the level of use in each province, the number of licenses sold per province, the conservation status in each province, the opportunity to meet our conservation targets there, and the number of returns that we see each year. So this year, for the first time, because we have a larger pool of funds available, the upper limit for grants is now $100,000. Applications can be submitted for one-year projects or for multi-year projects, so projects that go up to 3 years. The deadline for our application process is December 19th, and application forms and information are all available on our website for download. So this year in particular, because we've got a much larger pool of funding, we're really seeking high-quality, big impact projects for 2015. So one of the questions we often get are, how are grants awarded? How are the projects chosen that receive funding each year? So the first step is applications that we receive are reviewed by staff and our advisory committees. We have expert advisory committees for each province and for our central advisory committee as well for the, and they're made up of volunteers who are experts in the field. So they help us by reviewing all of the applications that we receive. The applications are then scored and ranked, and based on that scoring and ranking, the advisory committee makes recommendations on which projects should receive funding and how much to our board of directors. The board of directors then reviews those recommendations and the projects, and they make the final decision about what projects receive grants and how much. So the next question is scoring of applications. How are projects that we receive, how are the applications scored? And the breakdown is as follows. So 3% of the score is the potential to improve conservation and restoration of wild Atlantic salmon and its habitat. So in practical terms, what's the potential impact of the project for real conservation? Secondly, 30% is given to technical merit and project feasibility. So how practical is this project? How likely is it to be successful? Are good techniques being used? All of those factors are taken into consideration. Thirdly is partnership and cooperation. That's 25%. We really strongly encourage cooperation as part of the mandate of the foundation. And finally, cost effectiveness and budget detail, that's 15%. So looking at how realistic is the budget. Is it a good investment of funds? All of those factors are taken into consideration. So if you're considering making an application, the first step is to determine if it's a good potential fit for the foundation. So does the mandate and the mission of the foundation line up with what you hope to achieve with your project? Secondly, who is eligible to actually apply? There's 4 groups that can apply to the foundation for funding. First, NGOs, municipalities. Secondly, educational institutions. Number 3, that includes universities, community colleges, schools. And finally, First Nations and Aboriginal groups are also eligible to apply. In terms of eligible project locations, the project needs to take place in one of the 5 eastern provinces, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and Labrador, or it can be central, so a project that takes place that's broadly applicable to the whole region or among those provincial boundaries. We have 5 eligible product categories. Watershed plans, so the creation and the development of watershed plans or the collection of data to develop watershed plans. Restoration of habitat, restoration of stocks, restoration of access, or education. So education and outreach, those types of projects. Also, within each province and within our interprovincial fund, there's further priorities that each advisory committee has set to establish among those categories what are the real priorities for each region. And finally, you also want to think about the other criteria that we look at. So in particular, partnerships. Are partnerships something that you've emphasized in this project? Perhaps you have a partnership with a First Nations or an Aboriginal group, or vice versa. If you're a First Nations or Aboriginal group, you've looked at partnerships outside of your organization as well. In terms of the amounts that you might be looking for your project, we have minimum and maximum grant amounts. The minimum amount that we grant for an individual project is $5,000, and the maximum amount, as I mentioned, is now $100,000 for this year. We also have a requirement for matching contribution, and that matching contribution can be in kind, so other resources that are offered to the project. That could be volunteer time, that could be the use of particular equipment, or it can be in cash. But we do have a minimum, and it is a minimum of 33% of the total budget. Many of the successful projects that we do fund, however, have a much greater percent of matching contribution. But at a minimum, 33% is the least that we'll accept. Eligible expenses, we have a maximum amount that we'll accept of 25% of administration costs, and we also have a maximum of $1,000 per item for capital assets. So the foundation, we're not in the business of providing funds for long-term capital assets, so things like, say, buildings or boats or vehicles, for example. So just some general tips if you're thinking about submitting an application to the foundation. First and foremost, be concise. We have always had word limits on our applications for particular questions, and you'll notice this year if you've looked at our application form that word limit is actually highlighted in yellow because we really want people to pay attention to what the word limit is. And it's in place there for 2 reasons. First of all, we have to translate those materials, and it gets very expensive when it gets lengthy. And secondly, and most importantly, it creates an unnecessary burden on our volunteers for reviewing these applications if they get excessively long. Some of our advisory committees have to review upwards of 25 to 30 applications, and so it's really in your best interest to be very concise and clear about what the project is and what you're going to achieve. Secondly, consider new partnerships. As I mentioned, we really strongly encourage partnerships, and it's something that's taken into consideration very strongly in our scoring of projects. I should also mention that funds that are received from the foundation can also be used to count as non-government match in other projects, for example, RFCPP, which Terry is going to be talking about later. Our executive director strongly advocated that our grants from the foundation should be counted as non-government match, and he was successful in that. So in RFCPP, funds that you receive from the foundation can be used as match. I would also suggest that if you've applied to the foundation in the past and you haven't been successful, you definitely should review past letters of regret. So whenever a project isn't successful, we put together a letter and submit it to the proponent, letting them know why the project wasn't accepted. And there's often really good information in there about changes you might want to make to the project or to future projects that you're thinking about submitting. Consider the value for investment. It's something that we look at very strongly, and so do our advisory committees. What conservation value are you offering for the grant that you're requesting? I also would like to stress that it's very important to be realistic with your budget items. So the experts that make up our advisory committees are very familiar with what the going rates are for various activities and salary costs and other expenses for. So if you've padded your budget, if you've added an additional amount for what things are going to cost, that's going to be very apparent to the members of our advisory committee and to the staff as well. So it's important to be as realistic as possible when you're putting together your budget. Always keep in mind what expenses are actually eligible for grant money. So again, maximum of 25% administrative cost and a maximum of $1,000 per capital item. One of the things I would really strongly recommend if you're thinking about putting forward an application is to take a look at our website. One portion of our website is it's called Projects. If you click on the tab that says Projects, we essentially have a listing of all of the projects that we've ever funded, and you're able to sort those by the year that they were successful and by the province. And it's an excellent resource because it will allow you to take a look at what else has been funded in your region and also to search for similar projects. So it can give you a sense of what kind of grants have been given in the past for a project that might be similar to yours. And for each of the projects, you'll see that there's a really detailed listing of what the project entailed, a summary of the description, the amount of grant that was approved for that particular project, and even contact information for the coordinator of the project. And this can even be a potential source of future partners. So if you see someone who has done a project similar to one that you would like to do, it certainly doesn't hurt to get in touch and see if there might be any partnership opportunities there. So a few things that are new for our application process this year. We had a scientific research request for proposals. This is now closed for 20. Keep in mind if that appeals to you for next year. These are applied research questions that were developed by our Central Advisory Committee that were put out, and we specifically requested proposals for projects to answer those questions. As I mentioned, the upper limit for grants is now $100,000, so we're definitely seeking high-quality, big impact projects for 2015. In our application process, we've now got a grant recognition question. This is a really important question in terms of the overall assessment of the project. Acknowledgement of a grant that's received from the foundation is a really important consideration. It allows us greater visibility, which in turn allows us to help more proponents. So it's very important. Word limits, as I mentioned, please select those if you're filling out an application. And finally, limit this year for attachments that can be added to your proposal. So no more than 4 pages. Sometimes folks seek out lots of letters of support and want to add those in. I would suggest that a better way to show that support for your project is to include them in the partner information of the application, that component. So list out who is supporting your project and what they're actually contributing in terms of in-kind or cash support. That's the way we define partners, someone who is actively involved in the project and is making a definite contribution. So some of the common mistakes that can be avoided in preparing an application to the foundation, first and foremost, is your project a good fit? Preparing one of these applications takes quite a bit of time, and it's best to assess right off the top whether or not the project that you're proposing is actually a good fit with the foundation's mission and mandate. And if you have a question about that, if you're not sure, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone or send us an email, and we can tell you whether or not your project would be eligible. Secondly, read the instructions. There is a package of instructions that comes with the application, and it provides details of everything that I've just discussed and very clearly lays out what is required in the application process. I'd also suggest using the current application form. Sometimes folks save application forms from previous years, but we change it every year. And if you're using an old form, you may be missing some of the questions that have been newly updated. Make sure you understand the requirements and that you're meeting them, so that you've got adequate matching contributions, that you're not asking for funds for ineligible expenses, that sort of thing. I can't stress enough, be realistic with your budget. It's very important to be quite clear and reasonable about what you're requesting and what various expenditures might cost. Proofread your application before submitting it. This one might seem obvious, but we received a number of applications for which the grant that is requested doesn't actually match what it looks like is being requested in the budget, and that's required follow-up on our part. So make sure that perhaps someone who hasn't written the application reads it, ensures that everything is in place. That's a good way to prevent errors. And finally, ensure that you receive confirmation of receipt. I send out an email to everyone who submits an application, letting them know that I did receive it and letting them know exactly how many attachments that I received. If you have not received a confirmation of receipt from me and you sent me an application, I have not gotten it. So in that case, it's really important to give me a call, and we can find out what happened and make sure that your application is actually submitted. So all of the information, as I said, is available on our website. You just have to scroll to the very bottom of the page. That's under Application and Forms, and there you can download the instructions, the application form, and also the budget. And this is our contact information for anyone who might like to follow up with questions or visit our website. Don't hesitate to give us a call or to send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darla. So I'm going to switch the presenter over to Terry now.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Not your presentation screen yet. Just your desktop.
Okay, I may have to switch that, move that around.
Oh, it's coming over now, yeah.
Okay. Any luck now?
Perfect.
Great, great.
Okay, you're off.
So we're all set to go. Okay. All right, well, thank you, Darla. I guess I'll be doing a bit of the same as what Darla was doing with the goal to sort of inform you a little bit on how our funding processes work and how you can be better prepared and avoid common mistakes. So anyways, the goal of my presentation, of course, is to talk about the Recreational Fisheries Conservation Partnerships Program, a federal program that was unveiled last year, and to give you all the right tools, I guess, in preparing your application, which is due next month. There are some other resources. I just thought I'd put those up front so that you know. There is our national website where all that information can be obtained, especially when you come to the application guidelines. That's got all sorts of good bits of information in there. We also have some frequently asked questions and answers, and success stories to give you an idea as to what kind of project we might fund. Now, what is the overall goal, I guess, of the RFCPP? It can be summed up in one sentence, and that would be to restore, rebuild, or rehabilitate recreational fisheries habitat. So it's not limited to freshwater or marine. So anytime we talk about any type of recreational fishery, then if there's any intervention or project you can think of that would improve habitat and in the end, in turn, give better fisheries. Well, then that's what we're looking for. As far as contribution limits, up until now, I didn't indicate the total that we gave in our region, which would cover New Brunswick and PEI, but I'm thinking maybe like in the $1.5 million this last year, something around that range. But anyways, in a nutshell, I guess we're looking for projects between 20 and 100,000 per year. So in this case, or up until now, we had multi-year projects, but for next year, which is 2015 and 2016, there is only a commitment at this point to fund 1 year. So we would be looking for projects or 1-year projects in the range of 20 to 100,000. Of course, if you think your project is very good and it's a larger scale, we might look at it and may contribute up to 250,000. So that's the maximum. Now let's go to the basic eligibility criteria. There are 3, or let's say 4 things that we look for right up front. First of all, it'll be the first question: is your group a legal entity? And by that I mean, do you have a business or charitable number? Without that, you can apply. 2, is your main focus conservation or, let's say, recreational fisheries, which means you're a fish and game group, you're a watershed group. If this is the case, then you may qualify. 3, will your product result in long-term benefits to recreational fisheries? So are there direct benefits to fish within a year to 5 years? That's the sort of ballpark we're looking for. And one here that's one limit that we do impose is a 75% limit on the total project value when it comes to government funds. So once you pull together RFCPP, could be provincial money, municipal money, once you pull all that together and your other in-kind support, all sources from government or cash, government cash should never surpass 75%. And within that project, the federal government can never pay more than half of your project. So you have to be mindful of those 2 limits. So in other words, if you have a $100,000 project, the RFCPP will contribute a limit of $50,000, and you may have another $25,000 that may come from the province or municipal levels. What are the types of activities that could be eligible for this? Well, it could be stream, lake, and floodplain habitat restoration. So if there's anything in there where you have a restrained floodplain, or if it's damaged or it's eroded, there may be some work you can do in there to improve it. And then there's fish access improvement. That would be any impediments to fish passage. So it could be a faulty culvert. It could be an old pond dam that doesn't allow fish. So maybe in this case we could pay for the installation of a fishway, or we could pay for the removal of a barrier. We can pay for in-stream work. Let's see, the placement of structures could be digger logs, deflectors, whatnot, that will improve fish habitat in stream. We may pay to improve river banks, so bank erosion control. It could be, the placement of riprap. It could be planting trees, shrubs, anything to reduce erosion. Where we haven't seen any yet are, projects in the ocean habitat. So it could be the building of reefs. Let's say could be oyster reefs or clam habitat. But if we haven't funded any of those yet, but we'd be open to seeing some of those. And last of all, here's a new addition to the lineup. It's called chemical manipulations. It's fairly recent, just since this summer. And that's something they added for projects in some provinces where they may see aeration as being an option for improving, water quality and eventually, fisheries habitat. Liming may be an option as well. But these are one-shot deals, and they require the support of the provinces, meaning, natural resources and environment ministries. So if your project is one of those and it's got the full support of the province and it can be seen as sustainable, maybe we'll take a look at it. Here are just a few pictures I thought I would throw up just to show you the types of work we would pay for. On the upper left corner, there are breast mattresses, there are root wads, digger logs, shrubs, more digger logs, I believe, and also deflectors. So just some examples for you to see. Now let's get into eligible costs. That's really what it comes down to. What do we pay for? We'll pay for anything that pertains directly to your project at hand. We're looking at if it's a 4-month project out in the field or you're doing direct intervention in stream, then we'll pay for many of the expenses that are related directly to that. So we'll pay for salaries and benefits for the employees that are working on the project, not for persons who would be there year-round. Now, I understand that this doesn't apply to many groups. I'd say the majority don't have year-round staff. But for some in the past, let's say for example, ACAP groups had at least a paid person year-round, or most of them did. In that case, we would not pay for their salary. So keep in mind it's only for the project at hand. We can pay for a group to contract out professional service. We'll pay for travel to and from the site, whether it's per kilometer or if you rent a vehicle or truck and to pay for gas and all that. We'll pay for insurance related to the activities in the field. We'll pay for the materials that are either leased, rented, repaired, or bought. So that could be any kind of field equipment, materials to do the work. We'll pay for signage. And last of all, any GST, HST that is not claimed from the Canada Revenue Agency. That is, being a nonprofit group. And that's why it comes back to that business or charitable number. Most of you are able to go back to the Canada Revenue Agency and claim a portion of that back. So whatever I guess we'll pay for the portion that you did not claim, and we ask that in the questionnaire or the application as to what percentage you claim from the CRA and what do you plan to claim from us. Now, what do we not pay? That's also as important. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we don't pay for salaries of existing or core personnel. We don't pay also for overhead costs. That's office rent, internet, phone, paper, ink, that kind of stuff. We don't pay for administration as well. So if you have a bookkeeper or you have persons that are working in the office, we don't pay for those. And we do not pay for brochures, posters, and advertising as well. So it's quite clear those we do not pay for. Let's just a little glance here at the application, what it may look like to you. So when you open up the PDF, this is the first page that you come to we need to fill out. So the first part would be the key information on the project, a quick snapshot. So what is the title of your project? A good tip is often to use the water body name followed by the description. So in this case, I thought I just made one up here, River Bank Stabilization. So just by looking at the title, it gives me a first idea of what the project may be about. There's another box that's, I guess, is tabulated automatically from the budget table where we see the amount requested. That's more useful for us from our end. And the executive summary, a concise description of the project. I cannot stress that enough. As we haven't gone to the point, I guess, of limiting the number of words, but I can see why Darla mentioned it. Often, and whether it's through the foundation or through us, many persons will go through this same project. And when they're not concise or focused, it makes for a long read. And when you have many projects, we may miss some details. So it's best that to catch the attention of the reviewers to keep it concise and to a fair number of lines, I guess. It's something I've seen in the executive summaries. We're just looking for a quick summary, a paragraph or two on what your project is going to be like. We don't want to, putting mostly about their group, they'll spend most of their executive summary just writing about how good they are or what they've done, what is their experience. That's in, later on in the application. We just want a quick snapshot of really what your project is about. Now, section 2, this is where you get into the organization and who are the contact people, like the organization type, if you're conservation or fish and game, your business number, your address, basically what you're about, your mandate, the region you cover, what watersheds do you cover, and have you undertaken similar projects in the past? Those are things we're looking for. And there's here two persons we're looking for, and this sometimes it becomes confused. The principal applicant is basically the person who's authorizing the project, or is, I guess, is signing on behalf of the project. In a lot of cases, it could be the chairperson or president of the group. And in some cases, it can be the coordinator when they're authorized by their own group. The primary contact is actually the coordinator or the project manager. The person will be contacting on a day-to-day basis if we have questions about the project. Section 3, the project team. What kind of people will be working on this project? We're looking for basically the types of persons, like the position title, who will be managing, who will be coordinating, who will be the field supervisor, who will be the laborers, those types of people. We're looking for roles and responsibilities, their qualifications and experience that you're seeking. We're not looking for names or resumes for privacy issues. We're not interested in those. We just want to see what type of people you're looking for. Section 4, project overview. This is where we get into more details. This is where you state the objectives of your project and what are the issues that you're trying to address. Is the issue sedimentation, and what will you be doing to address sedimentation? What types of structures you'll be installing in stream? Will you be undertaking bank stabilization? So all those kinds of things, the solutions to the issue at hand. And of course, the project type, when we get into the type of restoration, then you get into the real details. Okay, we'll be using this type of shrub or bioengineering. We'll be installing deflectors to flush out silt. This is where you get into the real type of restoration that you're going to be doing. Project description, then we get more. This will be the, I guess, the executive summary, but explained further, I guess. There'll be some similarities there, but you get into more detail into the, the types of activities and how they may link to other initiatives or let's say the larger project at hand. Maybe the RFCPP will pay for the, in-stream restoration, but then part of your larger project may be, I don't know, the foundation may pay for, an educational aspect to your project or some promotional aspect to it. So this is where you would explain how all this links together into your larger project. Then we ask for the target species. In this case, you would list the species that are known to inhabit your area. Is it Atlantic salmon? Is it brook trout? Is it other species? Then you would go into your actual area where you'll be working. So we'll be asking for GPS coordinates. We also ask if you plan to ask for a provincial watercourse permit and the status of that. Have you applied already and you're waiting for an answer, or you haven't applied and you plan to? So those are things we ask for. Then in 5, this is where we get into the benefits. I guess if everything goes as planned, what kinds of benefits can we see? The government is very interested in knowing where the money is going. It's no surprise because, I mean, the RFCPP has come from the Economic Action Plan, so there is sort of an economic slant to it, though there are benefits to fish. So in this case, government would like to know, the number of partners you're working with. Those could be partners that provide cash or in-kind support. The number of volunteers. The number of persons paid with the RFCPP funds. It could be the coordinator, some laborers. It could even be, some contractors that you hired or consultants. They count as persons paid by our funds. And last of all, we look for the linear distance, kilometers or meters, or area like square meters or square kilometers that are restored as a result of your activities. Now, the long-term benefits to recreational fisheries. In this part, you would explain what you expect to see as benefits within 1 to 5 years. In the case of in-stream structures dealing with sedimentation, perhaps in 1 to 5 years, you'll see a reduction in embeddedness. You'll see an increase in the use of reds. Whatnot. I'm just thinking out loud here, but there could be many things you'd look for to confirm the long-term benefits. Last of all, we'll ask how the project results will be communicated. Will you be using on-site signage? In this case, that's almost a given because that's a requirement under the RFCPP. But will you do more than that? Will you go into local newspapers, meetings with the public, website, radio, TV interviews, those sorts of activities? Section 6, we get really into the details here of the project. And will require an annual work plan. In this case, what we're asking for a work plan for the RFCPP. So if you were to take that chunk of your project that's RFCPP specific, we look for start and end dates. What kinds of activities you'll be undertaking. Is one component in-stream habitat restoration? The second component could be the riverbank stabilization. Third activity could be signage. So. And when you plan to start and stop those activities. What are the key tasks in each one? So it could be stepwise. What are the steps you're going to go through to accomplish each activity? It could be, okay, first obtain your watercourse alteration permit. Second, buy your materials, hire your staff, all those kinds of things. Well, we'd like to see those in steps. Those are what we call the key tasks. And then deliverables. Deliverables to DFO. Once you're done that, what are the deliverables to DFO? Well, some may think, okay, well, we have better fisheries habitat. Okay, well, that's a given, but let's be a little more specific in this case. What do you plan to give back to DFO? In this case, it could be as simple as a summary report with a map showing where the work was undertaken and some before and after pictures. And when we talk about huge expenditures, one of the deliverables could be to provide invoices for services that you paid for. So those are concrete deliverables that we're looking for. 7, when we get into the RCPP budget, this is where the details come out as far as how you cost out your activities. So in this case, the various expense categories could be salaries, your purchases of materials or rentals, your travel costs, your signage, etc. And the level of detail we seek here, let's take the example of salaries. It could be the salary per hour times the number of hours per week times the number of weeks. Or some prefer to put it in, salary dollars per week times the number of weeks. And when you're purchasing materials, it could be the cost per unit times the number of units. So if it's I don't know, $50 or per roll of geotextile times the number of rolls of geotextile will give you a certain amount. That's what the level we're looking for. And then there is a table for other sources of support. So this is where we'd like to see your other partners and what they'll be contributing. So you could have, in our case, we could see the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation. Then we'd see a column where there's non-governmental cash support. Then you would add your amount in that non-governmental cash support column. It could be in kind from a local municipality. Maybe they'll provide machinery for, in that case you put the dollar value in the in-kind column. I should also mention that when it comes to in-kind support, in the case of using services from a contractor or consultant, if they give you a special rate, then the difference between their full rate and the discounted rate can count as in-kind support. So maybe a consultant will charge $100 an hour, but in your case, he'll give it to you for 15 hours. Well, then you've just obtained $50 an hour in in-kind support. So that's something to keep in mind when you're preparing your tables. Here's an example of a table. I'm not sure if you can see it right, but just showing how the expense categories are are distinguished here. In this case, in this example, we have the purchase of materials, vehicle rentals, the production of signs, human resources. So just to give you an example as to how that all breaks down. Section 8, then we focus on matching support. This is where you really show what types of support. Are they all governmental, various levels? So we like to see federal, provincial, and municipal. Non-governmental funding. I think in New Brunswick and PEI there's a lot more access to non-governmental funding, and that's good because that counts toward matching. So all sorts of trust funds count as non-governmental as well. And in kind, of course, as I just mentioned, any volunteerism. It could be a class from a high school or a local school. You could take, the 20-some students times, number of hours times, at least minimum wage and up. So in that case, you can give a quick calculation as to what the in-kind support would be valued at. So those are ways of doing that. And something, yes, I did put an asterisk at the bottom. The contribution agreement that we draft is always based on what is confirmed. And you'll notice in your application that we ask whether your partners and your various sources of support are confirmed. It's a yes or no. So it may be no at the time that you apply for the money, and once you're accepted, maybe it's become a yes, or the opposite may have happened. So nonetheless, once we prepare the contribution agreement, it will only be based on what has been confirmed and what's proven to us. So that's something to keep in mind. Here's another table to show you an example of what a table matching support may look like. In this case, this is an example showing various funders and some volunteers and how they break down. As you can see, there's a column from federal cash support. There's one for provincial/municipal cash support. The other cash support is basically non-governmental, and then there's another one for in-kind. When you put them all together, that's where, when you come to the total at the bottom, this is where we're able to distinguish what is governmental and non-governmental, and this is how we can calculate whether you respected the 75% total government funding. That's why we break it down that way. And the last section here where you provide photos, supporting documents, and signatures. It's pretty straightforward. Each photo, we just ask, a summary description and who provided the photo. Additional documents, maybe maps, permits, product plans, your confirmation letters, and supportive in kind. It could be from various sources, and feasibility reports. In the case of chemical manipulation, what I can't say. In that case, that we'd like to see some reports to show that your idea may work and may be sustainable. So this is where you would add those. Yeah, actually, I think I answered my next question, my next bullet here, where we'd like to see proof from support from the province and proof that it's sustainable. And of course, the last thing there before you send it off, you need to check the signature confirmation box to say you actually agree with it. And that would have come from the person who is the principal applicant. That is either the chairperson, president, or the coordinator, if that person is allowed to represent the group. Yeah, and of course, when you come to submit it, it's important to know for this year that December 12th is the deadline for the RFCPP. So if you want a chance at getting some funding for next year, you must submit it by December 12th, which is a Friday in mid-December. And you need to email that, for New Brunswick and PEI anyways, you need to email it to the email I've just listed here, rfcpp-ppcpr.gulf@dfo-mpo.gc.ca. For other provinces, as I suspect there are some persons from Nova Scotia, Quebec, and maybe other Ontario, maybe other provinces, you may want to look up the regional contact lists at the link that I just provided at the bottom here. This will list the various DFO regions and the emails to which you have to send your applications. And that's pretty much it. I think I may have taken a bit longer than Darla, but in a quick nutshell, this is really what we're looking for. Of course, there are more details to it, but that's why I provided the link to our website, at the front of my presentation, and also on the last page here. So please consult those links. There's lots of information, and of course, if you still have questions after consulting those links, our contact information is listed on the website, and you're always free to send an email or call us. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it wasn't too dry, and I hope it helps you, in becoming better prepared for preparing your application.